today we have Jorgen Hansen. He's a philosophy lecturer at UVU, and you have a master's in philosophy, right? UC Riverside? Okay, yeah, I think in front of me. Wrote it down, you know where it went. And so I went to do some searching on it beforehand and found a Rate My Professor page. And I know that, because I watched my wife go through it, the beginning ethics class that everybody has to take is not always a fun and easy class. And you would not believe the ravings people had for him in that class. They're like, I love this class, I wish I could continue to take this class for my whole college career. And they said that about some of his philosophy classes too. This was not an easy A. I wish I could do it again and again and again. So, he knows his stuff, people love him, he's a great lecturer. Let's give it up for Jorgen.
Thanks. This is my first time ever talking outside of an academic setting, or like not in a university, so it's kind of weird. But yeah, I teach at UVU. I'm a full-time lecturer. I'm actually starting the PhD program at the University of Utah, hence this shirt, because I left UC Riverside after I got my master's a few years back, and we're trying to work through that. So, as he mentioned, I forget your name. Jeff mentioned, the class I teach most often is Ethics and Values. It's a general education course, which means you have to take it. Almost everybody in the university has to take it to graduate. And so that means two things, given that I teach it in Utah County. One, almost nobody wants to take it. You have to, and it's philosophy, and they don't know what it is. And the most common view coming in is, I have my ethics and values worked out, so this is going to be a stupid course. The other thing is, students get warned about the course. I hear, probably 85–90% of my students are LDS, and their parents or boyfriend, girlfriend, bishop, roommate, friend, whatever, tell them it's a faith destroyer and to not listen to anything, when really what they mean is it's a critical thinking class. And I've never had a student ever come up to me after I've had 1,500 students there and say my faith was destroyed. They say, it really is good to shine the spotlight on your own beliefs and how you engage with the world and think about that more deeply. And that's really what the class should be about. So it's an interesting thing. I want to launch into talking about tattoos because without fail, I walk into class the first day and there's a bunch of 18 to 22 or 32, 42, 52-year-olds sitting there, and they don't want to be there, and they've been warned about it. And then I walk in dressed like this, because this is how everyone in the philosophy department dresses. And I say, I ask, is this ethics and values? And they say yes. I ask who the instructor is. They say, Jorgen Hansen. And I say, oh good, I'm in the right place. And I start setting up, and I look up, and every time about 80% of the class has this look of confusion and disbelief, or whatever this look is. Like, they think I'm a TA, or helping the professor, and then I start talking to them, and they realize I know my stuff, and then I graduated from UVU with a 4.0. I was valedictorian of the college. I was the first student at UVU's philosophy department to get accepted into a top-ranked PhD program. I was accepted into 5, and they start thinking, okay, maybe he's the professor, and you kind of see it dawn on them after about 20–30 minutes, and I have no delusions about why this is. I mean, I look maybe younger than I am. That's about to change. I'm closer to 40 than I am to 30 now, which is weird. I dress kind of casually, but really it's probably that I have a lot of highly visible tattoos, and you just don't think of that when you think of professors. If you've ever seen the movie My Dinner with Andre, has anybody seen that? It's a great movie out of 1980 where one of the characters remarks, you ever notice when you see a terrorist on TV, they look just like a terrorist? You go to a doctor and he looks every time just like a doctor. And so I thought, what does a professor look like? So I just Google image search professor. And here's the top few images. I'll tell you some similarities between all of them. White guy, white, male, glasses, suit, equations or formulas written on the board behind him. Here's the second image. White, male, suit, glasses, equations or formulas. I don't know why, I never write equations or formulas on the board, but It's from a movie, same thing. You get to the more laid-back professors, now he ditched the suit, everything else the same. This is about the most laid-back professor I could find. He has his sleeves rolled up so you know he's approachable. And then I walk in the room, and they've been warned about this faith-destroying course, and they don't want to be there. In fact, I joke with them in the summer class, you must really love philosophy, you're taking it in the summer. No, they want to get it done twice as quickly. So, even after the class, my tattoos tend to kind of stand out. Speaking of rate my professor, here's one of the latest ones I received. I love Jordan. He was extremely passionate about ethics and values. His passion made the class more fun. He has a lot of tattoos. So just keep that in mind if bald tattooed white guys make you uncomfortable. Well, that will come up again in the lecture, right? So I know that plays a huge part in my identity no matter how much I want it to. So that's what we're going to talk about today is tattoos. And almost nobody writes about this. There's one anthology that philosophers have written on tattoos, and then a scattering of publications. That's pretty much it. Nobody talks about it. So I want to define what a tattoo is real quick, and we'll just look at some questions I think are interesting. I don't know if you will. I'm also going to try to convince you of one or two things. Here's the definition of a tattoo, which will be important going forward. An indelible mark or figure fixed upon the body by insertion of pigment under the skin. So they usually use a needle or pin. If you're in prison, it might be a sharpened guitar string, or I don't know. Anything that gets the ink under the skin. Indelible is a vague term. We'll talk about it. It means not easily removed, which is going to come up when we talk about the legality of tattoos. And I want to add one addendum. We can talk about it later if you want. I think there has to be consent involved. You hear about people getting tattoos in the Holocaust. If we want to be really strict in the term, those are probably assaults or mutilations. If someone holds me down and gives me a tattoo I want to make a distinction between tattoos and that. It doesn't really come up in this talk, but I think it's worth noting. So I'm going to look at a couple of tattoos with you. When a lot of people who don't spend much time looking at tattoos think of them, they think of this clip art and you walk in and you say, I want that one. What does that say? Love kills love? I don't know, who cares? And then you get that on you, and 33 other people probably have it on you, and you walk around with it. And almost no tattoo shops do things like this anymore. You still see some things people like American traditional, this clip art type of thing. You get text, that's popular. Tribal, for some reason, is still popular. Polynesian tattoos. But if you want to really look at tattoos on the internet, there are funner ones that are fails. And people like to take the tattoo and Photoshop it what it was supposed to be. And you see how bad some of these tattoos are. You can kind of ruin your whole life. So you might think, why, I don't want my pet lion, it looks like a bowl of spaghetti, why would anybody do that? Well, in the last 8 to 10 years, tattoos have come a long way. This is a pet that Steve Butcher tattooed on someone. Butcher's an awesome last name for a tattoo artist. You can see the reflection of the cameraman in the dog's eye. This is a tattoo. This is healed. If you have a proclivity towards humans with their tongue out, here's another one. Here's a different type of tribal tattoo. If you go to my tattoo shop, Vic Back does some of these abstract things. Animals mixed with colors, realism mixed with abstract. My tattoo artist, Aaron Campbell, does like kind of watercolor, geometrical stuff. This is my wife's tattoo. She's here, by the way, right now, but I won't point her out. Some other geometrical stuff. You're starting to see an even bigger commitment. This guy had no tattoos. This isn't cover-up. Just tons of black. People don't understand what this means. What meaning could you possibly place in this? That causes a big discussion even among people who get tattoos.
He likes MC Usher.
What's that?
He likes MC Usher.
Possibly, yeah. Maybe it's a ode to MC Escher. You see a repeating pattern? This guy walked in with no tattoos and wanted this. Goes all the way up on his throat. Now, I want to talk about the left sleeve I got when I was 22 years old, 13 years ago. And I was working as a telemarketer at the time. Not what you would call a career, no offense to anybody doing it. And I spent months planning this out, like 6 months. I don't remember any of the meeting. It's weird when you're 35, it's like you didn't exist when you were 22, but I don't remember what I was thinking back then. And I wanted it to go down onto my hand, and my artist asked me, what do you do for a living? I said, oh, I'm a telemarketer. And he said, oh, then I'm not tattooing your hand. Why? Because it excludes you from about 97% of jobs. So now, I still want my hands and neck tattooed. I'm 35. I think most of you will understand why I want to do that. I don't fully. But I want to do it. This is a work in progress still. I'm leaving it open because I don't know if in 2 weeks I'm going to have enough courage to bring it down onto my hand. Because if I do that and I ever leave my job in academia, it disqualifies me from like 95% of jobs. It's true. Be like, hey, 4.0, valedictorian. Yeah, but this came 1 inch further down your arm. All of those accomplishments go out the window, and that's true. This is why I haven't done it yet, right? Turns out like hog farmer, tattoo artist, philosophy professor. Those are the jobs you can get, because they don't care what I did. So I didn't tattoo my hand. I still want to do it, but there's a reason for this, especially if you're trying to do real estate or sales or customer service. People associate tattoos with a lot of horrible things for good reason. Until about 15, 20 years ago, it probably was indicative that you were not the best type of person, especially if your throat was tattooed. Now that's not the case. 40% of adults 26 to 40 years of age have a tattoo now. 40%. That doubled in the last 8 years. So whether we like it or understand it, it's going to kind of change. And this is important, that this is the stereotypes people associate with tattoos. Because you might remember a few years ago when Trayvon Martin was murdered for being black with a hoodie on, Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Mavericks basketball team, had this quote. Look, if I see a black kid in a hoodie, I'm crossing the street. Just a black kid, just a hoodie. It's kind of weird. He also says, and if I see a white guy with a shaved head and tattoos, so me, he'll move back to the other side of the street, right? There's a lot of fear associated with it. If I get pulled over, police treat me very differently. So I think, as you just said, you have to be aware of what you're identifying with when you get a bunch of tattoos. When I get pulled over, the cop standing at the back door with his hand on his gun, talking to the back of my head the whole time. It's weird. So, given this conception, and the fact that we restrict tattoos all over the place, in some places it's illegal, I started to wonder whether this is really an ethical debate we're having, because philosophers aren't really writing about this. If these are ethical judgments that prohibit tattoos in culture, or if it's aesthetic, right? Aesthetics is looking at the nature or appreciation of beauty, not necessarily morals. So you might not like tie-dye clothes, but it would be weird to say they're illegal because most people don't like them. I assume most people don't like them. You should scan the room a little. Nobody wearing it? Good. So it would be weird if they're just aesthetic judgments. And I'm going to try to convince you, not through an argument, but through one example, that most judgments we make about other people's tattoos are aesthetic and not ethical. They have no ethical import whatsoever. So to do that, I have to look at a law in South Carolina. The definition of a tattoo in South Carolina looks very much like the definition I gave. Tattoos or tattooing means to indelibly mark or color the skin by subcutaneous introduction of non-toxic dyes or pigments. Here's something else in the South Carolina Code of Laws. It is unlawful for a tattoo artist to tattoo any part of the head, face, or neck of another person. This is weird. It should strike you as kind of odd, no matter how much you hate face tattoos, that it's illegal. They actually have a shop on the border of North and South Carolina, and if you want it to go onto your hand, you have to just walk next door, and they do it in North Carolina for you, legally. Which means in South Carolina, and that's not the only state, head, face, and neck tattoos are illegal. And I emphasize face tattoos for a reason, because there are about 5,000 Mormon people, mostly Mormon women, walking around Utah with face tattoos right now. So, if you don't know what microblading is, let me tell you, if you fill in your eyebrows, you can actually go to a technician and have them fill them in. And it lasts like 2 to 3 years before it starts fading. Now, if you're wondering what that is or why you would do it, I looked and there's a website for a microblading studio in South Carolina that says this, my emphasis. Microblading is an incredible and virtually painless eyebrow embroidery procedure that is a great alternative to tattooing. It better be, or it will be illegal in South Carolina. And a great alternative to constantly filling in your eyebrows. Well, you might think, well, what do? Here's what they do. Colored pigment, if you have a good memory and remember the definition of tattoos, chosen by the client technician, is implanted at the basal layer of the epidermis, that's the deepest layer of the skin, by tiny pins, needles, as the microblading technician draws the hair strokes of your new brow. Without fail, when I teach this, I have some 18, 19-year-old woman in my class with freshly microbladed brows, who's also Mormon, like most of my students, who really wants to fight with me. This is not a face tattoo. In fact, their religion prohibits it, so it better not be a face tattoo. You know what? My tattoo artist who's doing this has another job. She does microblading for a living. She says it's a tattoo. It's inserting pigment under the skin. They say, well, it fades after 3 years. So does tattooing stars right on your brow bone. That's why they have to touch it up. It's permanent. So, microblading literally is a face tattoo. If you're not convinced yet, we can talk about it real quick in the Q&A. The only thing that comes up is whether it's an indelible mark. And if you look at South Carolina law, all that means is not easily removed. So if you draw chalk on the sidewalk or spray paint, the second one's indelible, even if you can power wash it off. It makes it a crime. So this is actually unconstitutional, what's happening. According to the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, we have to treat like cases alike. We should treat microblading and tattoos the same, legally. Now, I don't really want to raise this issue because I suspect they'll just make microblading illegal. They don't realize yet it's a face tattoo. But it is an interesting phenomenon I want to get into because there are currently about 1 million people walking around with face tattoos and they have no problem with tattoos as objects in themselves. And because of this, you start to see doing things. In a sense, tattoos are like performance art. They're not like fine art. You can't make copies of this and sell it off, right? Fine art, you can replicate it 1,000 times. Performance art, like what we just saw, unless you record it and get some tamed down version, you have to experience in the moment, and what she just did is gone forever. That's true of someone with tattoos. They have to be in your presence, and it's a living organism that presents the art. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I want to look at a piece of controversial performance art to raise a point about how we view people with tattoos and why you have to have thick skin if you get a lot of them. Some of you might have heard of this before, Marina Abramovich's Rhythm Zero. Has anybody heard of this performance art piece? It's controversial. Fair warning, it's not pretty. Here's what the piece is. It's kind of boring. You walk into this awesome museum at 10 p.m. And from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m., Marina Abramovic, this is a few decades ago, is just going to stand there like this and look straight forward and do nothing else. That's all she's going to do. That's the whole piece. Pretty easy compared to what you just did. There's also a table with 72 objects and a note. The note says, I'm an object, I take responsibility for anything you do to me. And you can see some of these objects. There's wine and cheese and crackers and a feather duster and a chain and a scalpel and a gun with a bullet in it. You can do whatever you want to her for 4 hours. This could all be quite boring. And that's the performance art. It's controversial, but that's it. So you see them start wrapping the rope around her, they lay her down and sit her up. By the end, it's not so pretty. They assault her in every way. Someone cut her neck and drank her blood. Someone put a gun to her head. And you know she's not an object, right? You can see it in her eyes, but they have no problem treating her like one. After 4 hours at 2 a.m. on the dot, she starts looking around. What do you think the audience did? They scatter. She's now a person. She's not an object anymore. And they scatter. Right? They see what they were doing to a real person, but there's no way they think this is a mannequin here. Right? Now, why would I bring this up? Because a lot of people, when they look at this, they say, she's crazy. Why would you want to do this? But it could have went quite boring. You would hope if that was my performance today, that you would feed me wine and cheese and have a good conversation and maybe write positive messages to me, and that's the end. It could have went that way. It was the audience that objectified her and treated her in a certain way. Even if you don't understand why she's doing it, and even if it's controversial. That's important to realize, because not only is this a horrible thing, but she takes the brunt of the criticism for putting herself in that position. As she should, but not to the full extent, right? We could have just been civil as human beings, as educated museum goers. Okay? So, here's the point I want to make that goes beyond tattoos. And we can talk about whatever you want. Everybody in this room identifies and expresses themselves in various ways. Everything you do does. And everything you do, other people make assumptions about you and apply stereotypes to you. You have tattoos, right? Some people dress more or less modestly, or have more or less hair, or whatever else. Sometimes not by choice. Here's what I think we should remember. That when you're expressing an identity, it's not an endorsement of every stereotype someone associates with that. We make a lot of stereotypical assumptions about Muslims and terrorists and Mormons and polygamists and black kids who wear hoodies and white bald guys with tattoos. Go talk to any one of these people and I doubt they endorse any of those stereotypes. France bans certain Muslim headwear. It's a legal issue now, just like tattoos in America. And it's not clear to me whether that's an ethical or an aesthetic judgment either. Now, this is important for a reason I'll wrap up in a second, but I want to show a quick video. Many of you have probably seen it. It's produced by a Danish television company, so when they start saying, everybody loves Denmark, you think, oh, okay, I understand why they're saying that, because it's produced in Denmark. But I'm going to show this video and wrap up with a couple of comments about it. Hopefully we have sound in there. But the point is the same. Diversity is a good thing. You want every single person to look and act and talk the exact same way? That would be really boring, right? It should bring about an opportunity for conversation, not fear. Because every single person in this room and outside of this room expresses themselves differently. Now, I'm not saying that my students shouldn't judge me when I walk in and think I'm probably a student, not a professor. I clearly take some steps to not look very much like a professor. This is how I'm most comfortable. But this is true no matter what we're talking about in how people look. What do you see in that video? When you start talking about who people are and what they do, you can't split them into those boundaries so easy anymore. Most of our assumptions are made on the surface. And I talked about this with the beginning, talking about the ethics and values class. There's one reason to take the ethics and values class, to look beyond the surface of something, to shine the spotlight on yourself and know why you think what you think and how you relate to other people in the world. That's the only purpose of my course when I teach it. So, it turns out people, myself included, if not especially myself, we need to remember these things. Maybe you can make stereotypical judgments about the average person who has a throat tattoo or 2 full sleeves. But that doesn't tell you anything about this person. I don't have a throat tattoo yet. We'll see if I get tenure. Right, so you see me walking down the street, you don't think philosophy professor. Probably because most people with 2 sleeves of tattoos aren't philosophy professors. You don't know what they are based off how short or long their hair is, or how short or long their skirt is, or any other thing about them. So here's the point I want to leave you with. Is I think, and you can disagree with me, we should look at individual people like individual books. Something that you can learn from, something you want to be unique and creative and interesting and different from any book you've read if possible. It would be really boring to read the same book over and over. And this is important because if Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, sees me walking down the street tomorrow, he's going across the road. He could have had an interesting philosophical discussion instead. So that's my email. If you want to send me any questions or talk further, I would love to talk and answer some questions if we have time, and get your feedback on how you feel about my arms and presentation.
Probably got about 10 minutes for Q&A.
10 minutes for Q&A.
I have a question about, whether it's an ethical question or an.
This is an open question. I'm still trying to figure this out.
Yeah, I think that it's more a question of emotion, because when we're talking about this here, we're taking it from an analytical, rational angle. And a lot of people are not going around in their rational, analytical selves.
Oh, I think most people are not.
No, they're going around in an emotional frame of mind, and the emotional frame of mind doesn't generally take the time to go through the process of, oh, there's a person coming toward me, and we could have a conversation, and I can find out about him, and he can find out about me. People are usually really self-absorbed. So, and in their emotional mindset.
Yeah.
Right? So how would you expect, or how could you expect, or what could you do so that you didn't have to expect that people are going to make those snap judgments? Because they're going to be
I think people
novel there.
can't help the judgments they make. I talk to my students about this all the time. You don't choose your favorite band, favorite color, favorite food. It's things you discover about yourself. And usually if you're put in a diverse room of people, you discover a lot of other things about yourself. Maybe like subtle racism, sexism, aversion to modesty or immodesty or any other such thing. I don't know how to handle those questions. This is why I have a very kind of low-end point that I'm making. It's to remember that we can't generalize based off our stereotypical assumptions to this person right here. And 99% of the time, I'm not going to stop and talk to anybody in the street, right? But if the reason I'm not stopping and talking is because they have like a hijab or a tattoo or something, that's the problem, right? If I would otherwise, right? And same with hiring practices or what we choose to legally, or what we choose to regulate legally. So I don't have an answer for how to change the general psychology of how people act towards others.
Or you wouldn't think to. You wouldn't even think to change it, right?
I would like people to respond out of curiosity rather than fear.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking they know why they believe what they believe. Right? This is why it's no different than teaching an ethics and values course. All my students come in thinking they know exactly what their values are. Until day 2, and they can't define the term morality, and now they don't know what they're doing. And then we go from there for 4 months. You had your hand up.
Mine is more of a, who's your tattoo artist and where are they located?
My tattoo artist is Aaron Campbell at 27 Tattoo. That's for this sleeve anyway.
That's the Salt Lake Group.
27 Cut, that's Charlie Square, right?
Yep, right across from Trolley Square. They have good artists. My artist tends to take new clients like once every 2 years for 10 minutes on Instagram. It's really hard to.
Right.
But here's something I'll suggest. If there's a waiting list, you're on the right track.
Right.
A lot of people tell me, no, like this guy's really cheap and can get me in 4 minutes. And I was like,
There's a reason for
good
that.
luck. Yeah, so like anything, you kind of get what you pay for in the quality.
Okay, so I wish I remembered more details about this, but there was a court case where they opted to cover up a guy's swastika tattoo so that it wouldn't affect the outcome of the decision made. And I've thought about it a lot and I still don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, so I asked the department chair at UVU, my boss, hey, what if I get my throat and hands tattooed? And he says, as long as it doesn't say like the F word, what do we care? So there are things you could get that would be probably highly offensive, right? I don't really know how to address these. I think if I'm a neo-Nazi and want a swastika, then that's my business, and we can make all sorts of judgments about those people, right? Someone having a swastika tattoo doesn't hurt me much. Should we regulate it at the workplace? Yeah, probably. Can we regulate it legally? Probably not. And that's what's crazy is you can go get a swastika tattooed on your hand in South Carolina, but not like your daughter's birthday on your neck or something. So it's kind of, it shows you further that it's not so much about ethical regulation, it's that we don't want a bunch of people walking around with neck tattoos, even though they can go 10 minutes north, get it, and come back and walk, and it doesn't solve any problem.
Well, so what do you think about like a court case like that? I'm taking it like into account as a piece of evidence.
Yeah, I think that's probably not smart. They could take a lot of my old tattoos as evidence of things that I no longer endorse. They are permanent. I don't know. Part of me thinks this is why philosophers don't write on these issues, because they're complicated and there's no groundwork to build upon. It's like people hate tattoos and people love them. And everything else comes from that. I don't know. I would have to think about it. It's an interesting case. I mean, I remember this Onion article that said, judge rules 18-year-old white girl has to stand trial as a 300-pound black man, right? Because the jury looking at you forms a lot of judgments. And if I am sitting in court tomorrow like this, there will be a lot of assumptions, and I don't know if they start pulling tattoos as evidence or anything else. I don't know. I don't know how to.
I think it doesn't, I think it really wouldn't matter in your case, partly because you are articulate, partly because you are very comfortable with freedom of speech. But for somebody who's a little more introverted, a little more chip on their shoulder, and they've got tattoos and they can't make eye contact with the judge, they're gonna have a lot harder.
I should say it because police treat me poorly for about 3 minutes, and then they realize I'm not what they pegged me to be or something like that. And you have to, if you're a cop, you have to look for neck tattoos probably, more than like someone who looks completely harmless. But not all stereotypes are bad. Many of them are very useful. But when we're avoiding and approaching people with fear over stereotypes, that would be my biggest worry in the court cases. If you're using this to play off something, swastika or otherwise, I'm not endorsing anything like a swastika, but to get people to make all sorts of assumptions that might not apply to this person or this person, that would be largely problematic.
So, what about the fine line between people who have like tattoos for a reason to like send a message, like just like with clothing?
Yeah.
You wear a shirt, you wear some sort of outfit because you like it, you like the way you feel in it, but you also know that you're going to be observed, and you want to be observed in at least a certain way, and that goes into the mindset there. Tattoos on the same wavelength there, like you get them for the reason you want, and the meaning they have to you. Yeah, and you know that other people are going to see it. So, with the intent to have a message, and the attempt to control that message, where's that fine line between communicating my identity or the things I'm interested in or the types of people, you know, like I'm a gamer, what if I get a gaming tattoo? To let people know, like, hey, we can connect over this. What about aversion? People who get tattoos because they don't want to associate with that sort of person. Like, how does that?
I think that's a person's right to do whatever they want to do, and you can't regulate that. I think we shouldn't regulate that. If you regulate it in the job, if I open a real estate company, I'm probably going to be biased against people with throat tattoos because they're just not going to get their job done. But that has nothing to do with them. It would have to do with the clients and things like this. How we delineate those types of terms, tattoos that bring us together versus those that are meant to tear us. I don't know very many people who say I'm getting a tattoo so people think worse of me or something like that. But like most of these things, I don't have preloaded answers because I started thinking about this about 6 months ago, and I don't know. I think all these questions are the most interesting questions that people need to be writing about going forward. One more question, maybe?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about the gender perspective on this issue, like how it differentiates between men and women. Like for men, they face issues with being judged as like, you know, gangbangers, that kind of stuff, when they have physical tattoos, especially like full sleeves, that kind of thing, which is something that women don't have to deal with most of the time, even if a woman does have a
So there are other
tattoo.
negative stereotypes associated with tattoos.
Right, talked about, like my future job, I wanna go into business, and as a woman in business, you can't have like any visible tattoos, whereas a man probably could.
Students often say to me, "You can be a professor with all those tattoos." I say, "I'm a philosophy professor." I don't think the business school's hiring me anytime soon unless I have a nice suit to put over all these tattoos.
But like, I mean, men also, like, they're expected to wear certain clothing that covers more, like as a woman, I can't cover my whole arms in the, in the
A lot of
office.
the best work on tattoos and tattoo ethics comes out of feminist scholars who talk about taking control of the body and it's nobody else's business and things like this. Just like if I want to get a nose job or any other thing, right? I think women who get tattooed present more interesting cases in most cases than men who get tattoos. And especially because tattoos, part of the negative stereotype that I put up is like this macho, whatever, right? Intimidating. That's not really the case with many women, especially if it's like a little pretty thing or something, right? Yeah, so I would love to vision, write, and work and talk about all of these things going forward because nobody else is really doing it yet, which is why I started integrating this into my ethics and values class, which I've only done since the beginning of this year. So, yeah, last.
Quick final thing. What is going to be your doctorate thesis?
Oh, it's going to be on personal identity and let me think of on the ontology of objects and events. Something much more complicated than this, but it will get into the aesthetics of identity will come up. It'll just be a secondary type of thing. So I'll probably work a bit on people who want tattoos or other such things, but that won't be the primary thing. I'm doing metaphysics and philosophy of psychology primarily.
Quick more questions. You always get the last word. Any of the resources you'd recommend for people that want to look more into the subject?
Oh, no.
There wasn't a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say wait 1 year and there will probably get a lot. Honestly, like 2 years ago an anthology came out and then UVU's philosophy conference, the keynote speaker talked about tattoos and that's when I started integrating it into my class and it seems like the time to start having the discussion.
Is a large part of that just because, like you said, the number of tattoos, that one
It's
population
jumping
rate is
quick.
doubling
I just think
in
people
some
didn't really care to address it. It's like I just read an article, a published article in philosophy on the aesthetics of punk rock. People are just daring to go do those things now because they contribute interestingly to the philosophical literature, right? So in the meantime, I would say what I'm doing is go sit in a coffee shop and talk to somebody and see what they think and push back on people. Like you said at the beginning, have open-minded conversations and know why you believe what you believe, kind of.
Okay. And are you available to stay and talk with people?
Yeah.
Want to talk? We end the meeting as on a fixed schedule because we got kids in the kids program, but we assume the conversations will continue as taking down stuff. Feel free to continue to ask questions and thanks everybody for coming.